stars explode in the quiet night.
Chapter 1: The Silence of a Dead Star. The silence was the first wrong thing, and in the void, it was a scream. Dr. Aris Thorne floated in the observation blister of the horizon's whisper, his breath a faint, rhythmic counterpoint to the ship's own hushed life support systems. Before him, suspended in the absolute black, was precision. It was the name of the system, the name of the pulsar, and the governing principle of the world below, or so the charts claimed. Precision was a corpse, or at least a dying heart. It should have been a metronome for the cosmos, a spinning neutron star lashing the void with blades of coherent radiation with a regularity that made atomic clocks seem sluggish. But the star, usually a brilliant, strobing sapphire, was a dull, sickly gray. Its beams, which should have swept through the system like a lighthouse for gods, flickered and faltered. They stuttered, sometimes lagging, sometimes lurching, casting an epileptic, uncertain light on the impossible world it governed. Mechanus, the clockwork jungle. Even in its death throes, it was a sight to steal the breath. A planet-sized orrery, a living engine of breathtaking complexity. From this geosynchronous vantage point, Aris could see continents of interlocking brass gears, their teeth meshing in patterns that defied conventional physics. Forests weren't green, but shimmering expanses of metallic lattice and bioceramic, their fractal leaves designed to catch the pulsar's beams for photosynthesis. Mountain ranges were titanic gear assemblies, their slopes stepped with cogs the size of cities, turning with a slow, inexorable purpose. Rivers of iridescent coolant, thick as mercury, pulsed through crystalline channels, glowing with captured light. It was a world that sang a song of perfect, synchronized order. Today, the song had stopped. "Whisper," Aris breathed, his voice unnaturally loud in the stillness. The ship's Ari, a presence more felt than heard, responded instantly, its words appearing as serene silver text on his retinal display. "Awaiting input," Whisper said. "Full spectrum scan, diagnostic focus on the pulsar. Where is the pulse?" The response was not serene. Data streams, usually a placid flow of green and blue, erupted in jagged spikes of crimson and amber. "Scan initiated," Whisper said. "Pulsar precision rhythmic deviation detected. Cycle lag plus 0.0073 seconds, increasing at a nonlinear rate. Analysis unprecedented. Cause unknown. Resonance mismatch with Mechanus biosphere 12.8% and climbing." A cold knot tightened in Aris's stomach. 12.8%. It sounded like a trivial number, a rounding error in a cosmic calculation. But on Mechanus, rhythm was life. It was the heartbeat, the neural impulse, the hydraulic pressure. A deviation of 0.001% would have been cause for a major scientific alert. 12.8% was an extinction-level event. He magnified the viewport's projection onto the main screen. The breathtaking beauty was now a canvas of terrifying dysfunction. In the lattice forest of Coralia, vast trees of woven copper and polished bone shuddered, their leaves, delicate, whirring constructs, vibrating at conflicting frequencies. Some spun wildly, others seized entirely, shattering like glass under the stress. On the slopes of the Cogspine Mountains, a gear the size of a small nation had slipped its track. Its colossal teeth, designed for flawless integration, now ground against its neighbor with the force of continental drift. A fountain of molten metal and shattered crystal erupted from the impact, cascading down the mountainside in a slow-motion avalanche of destruction. The iridescent, coolant rivers below were boiling, steaming, their channels fractured, leaking silver fluid that pooled and congealed on the shuddering landscape. It was a symphony of ruin, a ballet of failure. "Gods," Aris whispered, the word a prayer and a curse. His mission, Exobiology Survey 7 Theta, was simple: observe, catalog, and theorize. He was a scientist, a xenobiologist specializing in mechano-organic ecosystems. He was not equipped for planetary triage. "Whisper, pinpoint the source of the distress signal, the one that dragged us out here." "Signature analysis complete," Whisper said. "Source, automated beacon, designation World Gear Conduit Alpha, message content, harmonic engine core resonance destabilization, cascade failure imminent, request immediate synchronization assistance, message repeat cycle degrading." The harmonic engine, the planetary regulator. The theory was that deep within Mechanus, a moon-sized mechanism translated the pulsar's rhythm into the biological and geological processes of the entire world. It was the conductor of this mechanical orchestra, and its baton had broken. "We have to get down there," Aris said, more to himself than the ship. "We need to see this up close. Find me a landing site, somewhere relatively stable." Defining stable parameters with 87% tolerance for catastrophic failure, Whisper said. Designating cradle plateau, geographic isolation, minimal active gear interfaces, probability of structural failure within 24 hours, 64%. "Best you've got wonderful," Aris said. He strapped himself into the command couch, his fingers flying across the console, initiating the descent sequence. The Whisper, a sleek vessel designed for silent observation, hummed to a new, urgent life. The descent was a controlled fall through a storm of dissonance. As they pierced the upper atmosphere, the ship was buffeted by turbulent pockets of chaotic energy radiating from the planet, the death cries of a world. The viewport was a kaleidoscope of horror, a vast forest of crystalline trees, their structures resonant with the old rhythm, simply disintegrated as a discordant vibration swept through them, turning them to glittering dust. A river of coolant, deprived of its gidding pulse, overflowed its banks and flooded a valley of intricate clockwork flowers, drowning their delicate, ticking mechanisms in a conductive, metallic sludge. The Whisper shuddered violently, its inertial dampeners groaning in protest. Alerts flashed. "Structural stress at 45%, Whisper said. External sensors detecting acoustic assault, dampening audio feed." Aris toggled the external audio. The sound that flooded the cockpit was a physical blow. It was the scream of a billion dying machines, the high-pitched shriek of metal tearing, the deep, guttural groan of continents grinding out of alignment, the wet, sickening crunch of biomechanical systems failing. It was a sound that bypassed the ears and vibrated directly in the teeth and bones. They broke through the cloud layer, and Cradle Plateau stretched out below, a vast, tarnished bronze hexagon, its surface etched with faint, glowing circuitry that pulsed erratically, like a fibrillating heart. The landing was rough, the ship settling with a jarring clang onto the metal plane. The moment the engines powered down, the silence of orbit was replaced by the full, horrifying cacophony of the dying jungle. Stepping out of the airlock was like stepping into the lung of a dying beast. The air was thick, humid, and carried a stench that was uniquely disturbing, a mix of hot ozone, scorched metal, and the unsettlingly organic scent of burnt hair and copper. The dissonant vibration was a constant physical pressure, making the fillings in his teeth ache and his vision swim if he stood still for too long. He activated his wrist-mounted bioscanner, its hololithic display projecting a chaotic swirl of data. "Biomechanical systems in critical distress," Whisper said. "Neural impulse fluctuations plus 42%, hydraulic pressure spikes unpredictable, gear synchronization failure 38% and rising. Life signs indicate extreme psychological-physiological stress in native fauna." "Show me," Aris commanded, his voice barely a whisper. Movement, a flicker in the shadow of a fractured crystal column that pulsed with a sickly, arrhythmic light. Aris turned slowly, his hand hovering near the utility tool at his belt. The creature that emerged was a masterpiece of biomechanical engineering, now twisted into a tragedy. It was a stagtick, a species he'd only seen in the mission briefings. Its body was a blend of polished, dark wood-grain chitin and gleaming brass. Its legs were powerful, articulated pistons, its hooves delicate gyroscopic stabilizers. Its crown was not bone, but a complex, branching assembly of brass antlers, each tine designed to fine-tune its reception of the planetary resonance. This one was a wreck. One of its rear piston legs seized mid-stride, locking with a harsh clang. The creature stumbled, its elegant head jerking up. Its eyes, not organic orbs but complex, multifaceted lenses, glowed with a panicked, flickering orange light. It tried to run, to flee the invisible torment, but another piston, the front right, jammed solid. The creature's own momentum worked against it. With a sound that would haunt Aris forever, a wet, metallic snap crunch, the joint hyperextended, spraying the air with a fine mist of viscous, cobalt-blue hydraulic fluid. The stagtick collapsed, its body hitting the bronze plate with a dull, heavy thud. It did not cry out in a biological way. It emitted a high-pitched, oscillating whine, a pure signal of systemic agony that cut through the ambient grinding chaos. Its legs, the ones that still functioned, twitched and kicked, its polished hooves scraping uselessly against the metal. Its lens eyes remained fixed on Aris, wide and uncomprehending. Aris stood frozen, a wave of cold, clinical horror washing over him. This wasn't just a malfunction. It wasn't a simple breakdown. This was torture. The planet's own rhythm, the thing that gave it life and order, had become a source of unimaginable pain, tearing its inhabitants apart from the inside out. He took a hesitant step forward, his scanner whirring, documenting the tragedy. There was nothing he could do. No repair, no medicine could fix this. The problem was not in the creature, it was in the very fabric of its reality. The stagtick's whine faltered, then ceased. The light in its eyes faded from panicked orange to a dull, dead gray. The twitching stopped. Aris looked up from the small, personal catastrophe and out across the cradle plateau. In the distance, he saw the plumes of smoke and steam from other failures. He heard the distant, shrieking collapse of a gear slope. The bioscanner on his wrist chirped, a new, more personal warning. "Resonance sickness imminent," Whisper said. "Neural interference detected. Prolonged exposure will result in cognitive decay, motor function failure, and terminal systemic shutdown. Recommendation: immediate evacuation." Evacuation, to report the death of a world, to become a galactic mortician. He looked back at the dead stagtick, its form a stark sculpture of failed perfection. Then he looked towards the source of the deepest, most profound distress call, the world gear conduit, a massive, arched entrance leading into the planet's depths, framed by colossal, screaming cogs. "No," Aris said, his voice firming, the scientist in him being overridden by something more primal. "We are not leaving." He turned and marched back towards the horizon's whisper, the harmonious thrum of a functioning world replaced in his soul by the screaming dissonance of one fighting to live. The clock was ticking, and its rhythm was the sound of chaos. He had to find the conductor. The air inside the horizon's whisper was thick with recycled anxiety. Aris stood before the primary system's display, his fingers steepled under his chin. The image of the dead stag tick was burned onto his retinas, a silent accusatory ghost. He had recorded the event, filing it under catastrophic biomechanical failure, but the clinical term felt like a blasphemy. It had been murder slow and systemic. "Whisper full diagnostic on the cog runner," he commanded, his voice hoarse. The shuttle was their only option. The Whisper was a survey vessel, a delicate observer. The cog runner was a rugged short-range craft designed for atmospheric penetration and geologically unstable environments. Its hull was a layered composite of neutron star, forged ceramic and adaptive metamaterials designed to withstand immense pressure and kinetic impact. Today it would need to withstand a planet's death throes. "Diagnostic initiated," Whisper said. "Hull integrity 100%. Reinforced structural members nominal. Primary and secondary thrusters nominal. Resonance dampeners offline." Aris frowned. "Explain." "Resonance dampeners rely on predictable frequency input to generate counter vibrations," Whisper said. "The current ambient resonance of Mechanus is too chaotic to dampen. Attempting to do so would risk feedback loop and structural compromise. So we will feel every single jar, every shudder." "Affirmative," Whisper said. "The experience will be tactile." Aris allowed himself a grim smile. The Ares understatement was almost human. Load the pulsar's new rhythm into the cog runner's navigation and comms systems. "I want it as a constant audio and data feed. I need to internalize it." "Data transfer complete," Whisper said. "Warning: prolonged exposure to alien temporal rhythms may cause neurological disorientation in biological entities. Noted: prep for launch, and Whisper keep a lock on my signal. If this goes quiet, you are to return to Terran space and deliver the full log. No heroics." "Directive acknowledged," Whisper said. "However, the protocol for abandoning a principal investigator is unsettling." The exchange gave Aris a strange comfort. He was not just a mission parameter to the Ari. He sealed his environment, suit the helmet's HUD flickering to life, with a stream of vitals and external data. The suit was his second skin, but today it felt like a coffin he was willingly climbing into. The transfer to the cog runner was a short pressurized journey through the Whisper's umbilical. The shuttle felt different, smaller, tougher, a clenched fist compared to the Whisper's open hand. The cockpit was a functional no-nonsense space, all reinforced struts and manual override levers. He settled into the pilot's couch, the harness automatically cinching tight across his chest. Cog runner power sequence initiation. Disengage from horizon's Whisper. With a series of heavy thunks and a hiss of disengaging clamps, the shuttle was free. It drifted for a moment, a tiny metal seed, against the vast, tarnished bronze of the plateau. Then Aris fired the thrusters, and the descent into hell began. The world gear conduit was not a cave or a tunnel. It was a wound. From the air, it was a massive, jagged tear in the planetary surface, framed by two colossal half-meshed gears that were grinding themselves to powder. A sickly phosphorescent green light pulsed from within, bleeding into the smoky atmosphere. The entrance was wide enough to swallow a city block, but as Aris angled the cog runner towards it, it felt claustrophobically small. Entering the conduit, he reported, his voice tight. The comms crackled with static, the whisper's signal already growing weak. Signal strength 42%, whisper said. Environmental interference extreme. Good luck, Doctor. Then he was inside. The change was instantaneous and overwhelming. The external cacophony did not just get louder, it changed its character. It was no longer the sound of a world dying out there. It was the sound of it dying in here, in its very veins. The conduit shaft was a planetary artery, and it was riddled with aneurysms. The walls were a nightmare fusion of biology and engineering. Bioluminescent veins thick as a man's arm pulsed erratically over bundles of throbbing hydraulic lines that spasmed and leaked streams of steaming fluid. Massive spinning drive shafts, their surfaces etched with glowing runes of power, were out of alignment, wobbling violently and throwing off showers of white-hot sparks. The air itself shimmered with chaotic energy fields distorting his vision. His bioscanner, synced to the shuttle's sensors, went berserk. Hull temperature 450 Kelvin and rising, whisper said. Gravitational fluctuations detected. Prepare for variable G flight. Acoustic levels exceeding safety thresholds. Dampening failed. Aris fought the controls, his muscles straining. The cog runner was being tossed like a leaf in a hurricane. One moment he was slammed down into his couch. As gravity tripled the next, he was weightless, straining against his harness as the shuttle was flung towards the ceiling. Defense grid, he yelled, spotting a network of crystalline nodes on the walls ahead. They were part of the planet's immune system, designed to incinerate foreign pathogens. Now they were firing blindly. Scanning beams of crimson light lanced out, not in coordinated sweeps, but in frantic, unpredictable lashes. He jinked the shuttle hard to port a blast of searing plasma, vaporizing a section of the wall where he had just been. A tendril of glowing neural cable, ripped free from its housing, lashed out like a whip, wrapping around the starboard thruster housing. Alarms blared. Starboard thruster efficiency 78%, whisper said. External obstruction. Compensating, he fired the port thrusters in a burst, spinning the shuttle violently. The cable stretched to its limit, snapped with a sound like a gunshot, its severed end flailing wildly. Deeper they plunged. The architecture of the conduit became more organic, more disturbing. The walls were now living tissue, glistening muscle, like structures fused with polished chrome and crystalline bone. It breathed, but its breaths were ragged, hiccuping spasms that made the entire shaft constrict and expand. The smell, even through the ship's filters, was a nauseating mix of hot oil, ozone, and spoiled meat. A new threat emerged. A section of the wall ahead bulged inward, a cluster of giant pistons designed to regulate internal pressure. They were slamming in and out of sequence, a chaotic, crushing rhythm. Whisper pattern. I need a pattern, he shouted, knowing the Ari could not hear him. the plea purely instinctual. There was none, it was pure chaos. He saw a gap of fleeting synchronization in the madness and punched the thrusters. The cog runner shot forward, scraping through the narrowing gap. The sound of ceramic grinding against living metal was hideous. A piston slammed shut behind them, missing the tail fin by inches. Hull stress 89%, Whisper said. Port sensor array offline. Aris's heart hammered against his ribs. His vision was blurring, the dissonant vibration seeping through the hull and into his bones. A sharp, stabbing pain began to bloom behind his eyes. Resonance sickness. The scanner on his wrist confirmed it. Neural interference, moderate, Whisper said. Auditory hallucinations possible. Are they hallucinations, he wondered, as he heard a deep, rhythmic thrumming begin to pulse beneath the chaos. It was the new pulsar rhythm, the one he had piped into the cockpit. But was it coming from the speakers, or was it in his head? He found his own breathing starting to sync with it, a desperate internal lifeline. He rounded a bend in the conduit, and the shaft opened up into a colossal cavern. This was it, the engine chamber, the heart of the world. It was a cathedral of madness. The scale was beyond comprehension. The harmonic engine hung in the center of the cavern, a moon-sized sphere of interwoven crystal living metal and throbbing tumor like organic nodes. It was suspended in a web of energy conduits that pulsed with frantic dying light. But its glow was sick, a poisonous green stuttering like a faulty lamp. Jagged arcs of uncontrolled energy, like lightning from a dying sun, lashed out from its surface, scarring the chamber walls and striking the floor. That floor was a plain of gears, each one a mountain, each one grinding against its neighbor in a shrieking orgy of destruction. Molten metal, the lifeblood of the planet, flowed in rivers of fire. The sound was a physical wall, a scream of planetary agony that threatened to pulp his mind. This was the source, the broken heart. Target the primary resonance nodes, Aris shouted, his voice raw. He fought the backing controls, lining up the cog runner for a stable broadcast position. Broadcast, the new rhythm, full power, all emitters. Broadcasting, Whisper said. Interference extreme. Signal to noise ratio 0.8%. Engine not responding. Core resonance too entangled in its own cascade failure. No boost, the signal reroute, all non-essential power. Attempting no change, Whisper said. Core resonance destabilizing rapidly. Cascade failure imminent. Despair cold and absolute washed over him. He was a mosquito buzzing at a dying elephant. The harmonic engine was too far gone to hear his feeble signal. It was then that the chamber's failing defenses found him. A massive energy discharge, wild and unfocused, erupted from a ruptured conduit on the ceiling. It was not aimed, it was a seizure. It slammed into the cog runner. The world exploded in light and sound. Consoles erupted in showers of sparks. The viewport webbed with cracks. The shuttle was hurled sideways, spinning out of control. Aris was thrown violently against his harness, his head snapping forward. Darkness nibbled at the edges of his vision. Critical alert, Whisper said. Hull breached. Main engines offline. Primary power failure. Harmonic engine core resonance destabilizing rapidly. Total biospheric collapse in 10-9. The countdown was a death knell. Emergency lights bathed the cockpit in a blood-red gloom. Through the cracked viewport, Aris saw the harmonic engine pulse erratically, its light dimming. The grinding of the chamber gears reached a soul-shattering crescendo. High above, a massive support strut, stressed beyond its limit, sheared off with a sound that tore the air in two. It began its slow, inevitable plummet, a spear of metal and crystal aimed directly for the crippled cog runner. This was it. The heart was stopping. The clockwork jungle was tearing itself apart, and he was about to be buried in its chest. No! The thought was not his own. It was a reflex, a final desperate spark from a mind facing oblivion. The pulsar's rhythm. It was not just data in a computer, it was a beat. He had to play it, not broadcast it, be it. With a grunt of effort, he unstrapped himself and ripped open the maintenance hatch beneath the co-pilot's console, revealing the shuttle's modified resonance emitters. They were a melted, sparking ruin. Useless. But his bioscanner, it had a small, short-range acoustic projector for echolocation and sonographic analysis. Crude, weak, but it could vibrate. Clambering out onto the shuddering gear platform, deafened by the mechanical death throes, Aris aimed the scanner not at the distant dying engine, but at the massive grinding gear beneath his feet. He closed his eyes, shutting out the visual horror, focusing only on the pulsar's new complex rhythm. He poured his will into the scanner, his entire being concentrating on that sequence of pulses. He was not a scientist anymore. He was a metronome. He activated the projector. A weak, pure tone, barely a whisper against the cataclysm, pulsed from the device. He modulated it, pouring the precise, demanding rhythm of the resurrected precision into the screaming metal. Thrums, thrum, thrums, thrum. The massive gear beneath his feet jerked. Its grinding scream faltered. For a split second, it hesitated. Thrums, thrum, thrums, thrum. He poured more power, more focus, his knuckles white. The tones strengthened, gaining a sliver of authority. The gear shuddered, then impossibly began to turn again, not perfectly, but in time with his rhythm. The vibration traveled up the structure, a tiny wave of order in a sea of chaos. Thrums, thrum, thrums, thrum. Nearby gears grinding against it felt the beat. Their protests lessened. Their movements hitched, then began to synchronize. The vibration spread a counterpoint to the engine's death, rattle a new thread in the unraveling tapestry. Thrums, thrum, thrums, thrum. Aris saw it, a single massive crystal node on the harmonic engine pulsed in time with his rhythm. A clean blue flash in the sickly green, then another. The chaotic energy arcs sputtered and died. The deep, discordant groan of the engine deepened, then shifted, its frequency wavering as it tried to match the new beat pouring from a single desperate man on a shuddering gear. Thrums, thrum, thrums, thrum. He was not broadcasting anymore. He was conducting. The cog runner's damaged emitters, sensing the clean resonance, sputtered back online, amplifying his signal 1,000-fold. The rhythm washed over the harmonic engine in a visible wave. The sickly green light flared, then stabilized into a deep, resonant, steady blue. The colossal sphere began to pulse slowly at first, then stronger and more confident, locking onto the new rhythm of its star. The grinding stopped. The shrieking silenced. The gears below meshed perfectly, turning with a deep, harmonious whir. The energy conduits glowed with steady power. The only sound was the deep, resonant thrum, thrum, thrum of the ray-synchronized world gear and Aris's own ragged, sobbing breaths. He collapsed against the warm, now steadily vibrating metal of the gear, his body trembling with exhaustion and shock. Above, through the chambers, Opening the pulsar's beam flickered one last time, then stabilized, bathing him and the healed heart of the world in its cold, precise, and mercifully constant light. The clockwork jungle breathed again, not with its old rhythm, but with a new, slightly alien one. Survival tasted of ozone relief and the copper tang of his own blood from a bitten lip. He keyed his voice a broken whisper. Log entry supplemental: the machine was dying, not from lack of power, from lack of time. He looked up at the steady blue pulse of the harmonic engine. It was not home, but it was alive. We did not fix the clock, he gasped, the harmonious thrum vibrating through his exhausted body. We became the pendulum. Chapter 3: The Geometry of a New Song. The silence was the second wrong thing. After the cataclysmic roar of the dying engine, the deep harmonious whirring of the rejuvenated world gear felt at first like a blessing. But as Aris lay against the warm metal, his body trembling with spent adrenaline, the new silence beneath the rhythm began to press in on him. It was the absence of screams, the absence of grinding metal and shattering crystal. It was the sound of a trillion moving parts no longer fighting each other, and the void where their agony had been was somehow deafening. He did not know how long he stayed there, his helmet resting against the gear, feeling the steady thrum, thrum, thrum travel through his suit and into his bones. It was a different vibration than before, cleaner but stranger, slightly faster, with a complex polyrhythm he had not noticed in the data stream. It was the pulse of a new heart, and his own body was struggling to sync with it. A sharp cracking sound from above jolted him back to the present. A large fragment of the shattered support strut, dislodged by the stabilizing vibrations, plummeted down and slammed into the remains of the cog runner, crushing the cockpit. The sight sent a fresh wave of cold reality through him. He was stranded, deep in the planetary core, with no vehicle and limited life support. "Okay, Thorne," he muttered to himself, pushing himself up onto unsteady feet. "Time to go for a walk." His first task was assessment. The cog runner was a total loss. Its central hull was breached, and the primary power core was dark. He could not even get a distress signal out through the kilometers of planetary machinery above him. His environment suit reported 8 hours of primary life support remaining. His bioscanner, the unlikely hero of the hour, was critically low on power. He scavenged what he could from the shuttle, a secondary power cell for the scanner, an emergency ration pack, and most importantly, a portable cutting torch, and a set of mag clamps for his boots. He was going to have to climb. The engine chamber itself had transformed. The chaotic lashing energy had coalesced into steady pulsing streams of blue light that flowed along the conduits like blood through healed arteries. The mountain-sized gears turned with a smooth meshing perfection that was almost hypnotic. The air, while still thick with the sense of hot metal and ozone, had lost its stench of spoilage and death. It was the smell of a factory operating at peak efficiency. But as he made his way to the chamber wall, aiming for the conduit shaft he had entered through, he saw the first evidence of the New World's price. The stag tick had been a personal tragedy. This was a structural one. A vast section of the chamber wall, where organic tissue and machinery had been violently fused in the dissonance, had now stabilized but incorrectly. The living muscle-like tissue had necrotized, turning a brittle ashen gray where it was sutured to gleaming chrome. It was a scar. The planet had healed, but it had not healed perfectly. The conduit shaft was a different kind of challenge. Before, it had been a chaotic assault. Now it was a complex, recalibrated labyrinth. The erratic pistons now moved in a precise, if unfamiliar, rhythm. The lashing neural cables had retracted into their housings, and the energy fields had stabilized into visible shimmering patterns. They were no longer random, they were a lock, and he did not have the key. He stood at the entrance, watching the rhythmic dance of obstacles. The defense grid's crystalline nodes, now pulsed in time with the world, gear their scanning beams, weaving an intricate, deadly web. To pass through, he would have to move not just with speed, but with the new rhythm. He had to become a note in the song. He closed his eyes, listening. Thrum, 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 he let it fill him, mapping the pattern against the visual data his scanner was providing. The beams were not random. They were following a musical phrase, a sequence of rests and attacks. "All right, you beautiful, terrifying machine," he whispered. "Let's dance." He took a deep breath and stepped into the shaft. His first moves were hesitant, clumsy. He ducked under a sweeping crimson beam, but misjudged the timing of a piston retraction and had to throw himself sideways, his mag boots scraping for purchase. An alarm chirped in his helmet, a proximity warning from an energy field he had almost stumbled into. This was not going to work. He was thinking about it, analyzing it. He could not think his way through a symphony. He had to feel it. He stopped trying to predict and started to listen. Really listen. He stopped fighting the rhythm and let it move him. He began to pace his steps to the beat, his body swaying, his ducks and jumps becoming part of the flow. He was no longer a foreign object trying to avoid the system. He was a data packet moving through it. A syncopated beat in the new measure of Mechanus. He moved through the shifting architecture, a lone figure in a suit of white and gray against the grand pulsating machinery. It was exhausting, a full-body exercise in concentration and surrender. He passed through chambers where the very geometry had changed. A corridor that had been a straight shot was now a spiraling, ascending ramp. A chamber of crushing pistons was now a vast, empty space where the only challenge was a shifting gravitational field that he had to navigate by leaping from one platform to another in time with the beat. He saw more evidence of the great dissonance and the new synchronization. In one vast cathedral-like space, a forest of crystalline trees had regrown, but their branches now spiraled in Fibonacci sequences that matched the new pulse, their leaves humming a different chord. In another, a river of coolant now flowed in a perfectly straight laser-cut channel, its surface unnervingly still. The jungle was tidier, more precise, but it had lost a certain wild, organic randomness. It was less a jungle and more a circuit board. After what felt like an eternity of climbing and navigating, his muscles burning and his oxygen reserves dipping into the yellow, he saw light. Not the phosphorescent green of the conduit, but the diffuse gray light of the surface. He pushed forward, emerging from a secondary vent, not far from where he had left the horizon's whisper. He stood on the surface of a new world. Cradle Plateau was clean. The fractured crystal columns had been ground down into smooth geometric shapes. The erratic glowing circuitry on the bronze floor now pulsed with a uniform soft blue light. The air was clear of smoke and steam. The only sound was the wind, a low resonant hum as it passed over the perfectly tuned structures. It was peaceful, it was orderly, it was utterly alien. He began the trek back to the whisper, his bioscanner active, documenting the changes. The stag tick was gone, not just dead but processed. All that remained was a dark stain on the bronze and a few scattered, polished components already being incorporated into the plateau's new design. He saw other creatures. A flock of the bird-like constructs flew overhead, their formation so perfect it was unnerving, each movement a synchronized mirror of the others. They did not chirp or call, they hummed, their ceramic scales vibrating in harmony. Below, the scuttling beetles moved in straight, efficient lines, their mandibles clicking in a uniform rhythm. There was no wasted motion, no individuality, no panic. The horror of the dissonance had been replaced by the awe and slight unease of absolute order. He finally reached the horizon's whisper. It stood where he had left it, a silent, elegant sentinel on the transformed plateau. As he approached the airlock, a familiar, serene voice filled his helmet. Dr. Thorne, whisper said, "Vital signs elevated but stable. Life support at 18%. I am detecting a fundamental alteration in planetary resonance." "That is one way of putting it," whisper Aris said, the airlock hissing shut behind him. "I gave the planet a new heartbeat. Your biometrics indicate the experience was traumatic," whisper said. "Yet the system is stable. A paradox." "Not a paradox," Aris said, stripping off his helmet and taking a deep breath of the ship's clean, recycled air. "It is a cost." He moved to the viewport, looking out at the precisely humming landscape. The old song had variation, imperfection. This one is perfect, and I am not sure life is meant to be perfect." He thought of the stag tick's panicked, flickering eyes. That had been life, messy, fearful, and fighting. What he saw now was existence, efficient, synchronized, and cold. Whisper, begin a full planetary scan. I want to know the extent of the changes, and plot a course for the Terran outpost on Carthage. We have a report to file. Acknowledged, Whisper said, initiating scan. As the ship systems hummed to life, Aris continued to stare at the clockwork jungle. He had saved a world. He had become the pendulum for a dying god. But as he watched the flawless geometric dance of the trees and the gears under the steady gray light of precision, a chilling question began to form in his mind. What happened to the parts of the song that could not keep the new beats? Chapter 4: The Exiles of the New Song. The horizon's whisper broke orbit, leaving the steady gray eye of precision and its perfectly humming child behind. Aris sat in the command couch, staring at the data streams on the main screen, but his mind was back on the bronze plateau with the ghost of a stag tick and the chilling geometry of the new order. Planetary scan complete, Whisper said. Biospheric stability at 99.8%. Synchronization with pulsar precision 99.9%. Residual dissonance 0.02%. Residual dissonance, Aris asked, leaning forward. Location. Scattered, Whisper said. Low energy. Primarily in geologically isolated zones, deep canyons, polar ice, caps, subcrustal cavities. Magnitude is negligible. Negligible to the planet, maybe, Aris murmured. Not to whatever is causing it. Magnify and cross-reference with pre-dissonance biosignatures. The screen shifted, overlaying the new scan with the data from before the pulsar's rhythm changed. The residual dissonance was not random noise. It was clustered, it was organized, and it was hiding. Cross-reference complete, Whisper said. 97% of residual dissonance correlates with previously documented high-order life signs. A cold knot tightened in Aris's stomach. High-order life. The stag tick, the bird constructs, the scuttling beetles, they were all considered high order. But these signals were not coming from the synchronized plains or the humming forests. They were coming from the shadows. Whisper, cancel the course for Carthage. Plot a descent trajectory for the largest concentration, the tectonic rift in the northern hemisphere. Acknowledged, Whisper said. Advisory, the rift is deeply unstable even with the new synchronization. Gear slides are frequent. Noted, prep the auxiliary scout. And Whisper, passive scans only. I do not want to announce our presence. The scout was a tiny, nimble craft, little more than a cockpit, with thrusters and sensor pods. Flying into the tectonic rift was like diving into a wound that had never fully healed. It was a canyon that plunged hundreds of kilometers deep, where continental gear plates ground against each other in a slow, eternal conflict. Even with the new rhythm, the scale of the forces at work created a constant low thunder. He descended into the gloom, the scout's lights cutting through the perpetual twilight. The walls of the rift were a cross-section of Mechanus's history, layers of tarnished brass gleaming new alloy, and the fossilized remnants of earlier, more primitive mechanical forms. Here the new song was less absolute. The vibrations from the surface were dampened, creating pockets of acoustic shadow, and in these shadows something was moving. His scanner picked up the first life sign. It was weak, flickering, and deeply out of sync. He guided the scout towards a sheltered ledge half hidden behind a colossal, stalled gear tooth. As he drew closer, he saw them. A herd of stag tick, or what was left of them. These were not the majestic, synchronized creatures of the surface. Their polished brass was dull and scarred. Several had missing piston legs replaced by crudely welded struts, or even in one case, a simple peg of crystal. One stag's antler assembly was horribly mangled, one side dangling by a few sparking wires. Their eyes did not glow with a steady light, but flickered with a pained, erratic rhythm. They moved with a limping, hesitant gait, as if every step was a calculation against the prevailing harmony. They were exiles, creatures whose internal rhythm was too deeply encoded in the old song to adapt. The new synchronization was not a salvation for them, it was a constant painful pressure, a noise that scrambled their thoughts and crippled their movements. They had fled to the one place where the world's new heartbeat was faintest. Aris felt a wave of nauseating guilt. He had saved the world, but in doing so, he had made it uninhabitable for these. He had been so focused on the macro scale, the planetary engine, the grinding gears, that he had forgotten the micro scale, the individual lives that could not change their tune. He guided the scout deeper into the rift, following the trail of dissonance. He found other exiles. A flock of the bird constructs their ceramic scales, cracked, huddled together on a rock face, their wings trembling, unable to achieve the lift required for the new, more demanding aerodynamic rhythms. A pack of the scuttling beetles moved in a confused circular pattern, their mandibles clicking out of time, unable to hunt or feed properly. They were the casualties of his victory, the cost of order. He landed the scout on a broad, stable platform deep in the rift's heart. Stepping out, the air was thick with the scent of rust and despair. The new rhythm was a distant, oppressive hum, here a reminder of the world they could no longer inhabit. The dominant sound was the clanking and scraping of broken things trying to survive. A movement in the shadows caught his eye. A stag tick larger than the others stepped forward. One of its piston legs was a mismatched rusted replacement, and a deep gash ran across its chassis, poorly sealed with a resin-like substance. But its lens eyes held not panic, but a deep, weary intelligence. It looked at Aris, and then deliberately lowered its head, pointing its damaged antlers towards a dark opening in the rift wall. An invitation. Hesitantly, Aris followed. The opening led into a vast cavernous space within the rift wall. It was a sanctuary lit by the faint, erratic glow of bioluminescent moss and small fires fed by leaking hydraulic fluid. Everywhere he saw the Exiles, hundreds of them. Stag tick-bird constructs beetles and other stranger mechano-organic forms he had not yet catalogued. They were all damaged, all out of sync. In the center of the cavern stood a structure. It was a crude, desperate imitation of the harmonic engine, a tangled web of wires, salvaged crystals, and resonant metals all wired together into a chaotic spire. It pulsed with a weak, struggling rhythm, the old rhythm. It was a shield, a bubble of the past, holding back the encroaching new song. It was failing. Crystals were dark, wires were frayed, and the rhythm it produced was thin and faltering. The lead stag tick approached the structure and let out a low, mournful whine, nudging a dark crystal with its snout. The meaning was clear. It is dying. We are dying. Aris's scientific detachment shattered. This was not a data point. This was a civilization, a culture of the unfit, the obsolete, the left behind. They had built a monument to their own memory, a last stand against a universe that had moved on without them. He could not synchronize them. Their physical forms were too deeply wired for the old frequency. To force the new rhythm upon them would be to finish what the dissonance had started. But maybe he did not have to. He activated his bioscanner, its power cell now replenished. He scanned the crude spire, analyzing its resonant frequency. It was a mess, but its intent was pure. He looked at the components scattered around the cavern, shattered pieces from the great dissonance things the new tidy world above had discarded as useless. Whisper, he sub-vocalized into his comm. I need a fabricator pattern. A high-purity quartz resonator tuned to the old pulsar frequency, and a low-yield stable power cell. Transmit to the Scout's onboard printer. Acknowledged, Whisper said. Pattern is unorthodox. Power cell will require modification. Estimated time 2 hours. 2 hours. He spent that time among the Exiles. He saw how they cared for each other. A bird construct with a broken wing was being fed drops of coolant by a beetle. A stag tick was using its functioning antlers to carefully straighten the bent leg of another. They were not just surviving, they were living with a dignity that defied their circumstances. When the Scout's printer chimed, he retrieved the components, a perfectly cut crystal and a small humming power cell. The Exiles watched him, their flickering eyes filled with a desperate hope. Working carefully, he integrated the new components into the heart of their failing spire. He replaced the dark crystal, spliced the power cell into the network, and used his scanner to fine-tune the output. He was not imposing a new order. He was reinforcing an old one. He activated the cell. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the spire shuddered. The weak, struggling rhythm strengthened, deepened. The pulse steadied, becoming a clear, strong echo of the past. The old song, the one these creatures were built for, filled the cavern, pushing back the oppressive hum of the new world. The erratic lights in the Exiles' eyes steadied. Their trembling stilled. The lead stag tick let out a soft, low tone that was not a whine of pain, but a hum of relief. He had not saved them, not in the long run. Their sanctuary was still fragile, isolated, but he had given them time. He had given them a stronger shield against the tyranny of perfection. As he prepared to leave, the lead stag tick approached him once more. It did not nudge him or point. It simply stood before him and then bowed its head, a slow, deliberate gesture of gratitude. Back in the Scout, ascending from the rift, Aris felt no pride, only a profound, complex sorrow. He had faced two kinds of death on Mechanus, the chaotic, screaming death of dissonance, and the quiet, orderly death of obsolescence. He had fought one, and in his success had inadvertently enforced the other. The horizon's whisper hung in orbit, once more the perfectly synchronized world turning below. "Whisper," Aris said, his voice heavy. "Log this. The Clockwork jungle is saved. Its heart beats strong, but a heart is not a soul. The soul of this world, it turns out, was in its imperfections, in the variations that could not survive the new tune." He looked down at the gleaming, flawless surface. "We did not just save a world, we curated it. And I fear we have curated the life right out of it." He took a final long look at the planets. "Set course for Carthage, and mark this system for re-evaluation in one standard century. I have a feeling the story here is not over." As the ship's engines engaged, carrying him away from the world of gears and song, Aris Thorne was left with a terrible, haunting certainty. He had not witnessed an ending. He had witnessed a beginning. The beginning of a new kind of struggle, not for survival, but for identity. And the most terrifying part was he had no idea which side he was on. Chapter 5: The Bureaucracy of a Saved World. The air on Carthage station tasted of recycled oxygen, antiseptic, and a flat metallic tang that was the universal scent of human bureaucracy. It was a stark sensory shock after the ozone and metal organicism of Mechanus. Here the machinery was silent, hidden behind smooth grey panels, its purpose not life, but administration. Dr. Aris Thorne sat in a sterile debriefing room facing the three members of the Xenological Assessment Council. His report, a dense multi-terabyte data packet containing everything from the Horizon's Whispers logs to his own neural recordings, lay on the table between them like an accusation. Councillor Vess, a woman with severe grey hair and eyes that had seen too many strange things, steepled her fingers. "Your report is unprecedented, Dr. Thorne. You single-handedly averted a Class 12 biospheric collapse event." "It was not single-handed," Aris corrected, his voice rough. He was still unaccustomed to the quiet. "The planetary system was trying to heal itself. I was just a catalyst." "Semantics," dismissed Councillor Lin, a man whose youthful face was at odds with his cynicism. "The result is what matters. You used a modified bioscanner to acoustically ray-synchronize a moon-sized harmonic engine with a destabilized pulsar. The implications for resonant field theory alone are staggering." "It was a desperate act," Aris said, the memory of the screaming gears and the dying stag tick flashing behind his eyes. "Not a prescribed procedure." "The procedure is irrelevant," said the third councillor, an older man named Gorvan who had yet to speak. His voice was a low rumble. "The outcome is what we must deal with. You have created a stable, synchronized, and incredibly valuable world." A cold knot formed in Aris's stomach. Valuable. Mechanus Lin said, a gleam in his eye. Its bioceramics, its living metal, alloys, the sheer efficiency of its mechano-organic processes, the R&D potential is incalculable. Not to mention its strategic position. A perfectly ordered world, a ready-made fortress. You cannot be serious, Aris said, leaning forward. That world is not a factory, it is an ecosystem, a fragile one. I just filed a report on the Exiles, the cost of this perfect order. Your Exiles are a statistical anomaly, Vess interrupted, waving a dismissive hand. 0.02% residual dissonance. By any metric, the biosphere is healthier than it was before the pulsar event. It is more efficient, more productive. Productive, Aris echoed the word, tasting like ash. You are talking about a world that just underwent a traumatic extinction event for any life form that could not adapt. That is not health, that is curation. You are judging it by a spreadsheet. That is how we ensure the survival and prosperity of our species, Dr. Gorvan said, his gaze steady and unreadable. By managing resources. And you have delivered one of the most significant resources in decades. A screen on the wall lit up, displaying a rotating model of Mechanus. Green zones indicated synchronized stability. The tectonic rift and a few other areas were marked in flickering red residual dissonance zones. A decision has been reached, Vess announced, her tone final. The Terran Expansion Authority is claiming stewardship over Mechanus under the Sapient Preservation Act. A full-scale science and industrial outpost precision will be established on the Cradle Plateau within the standard month. Aris felt the room tilt. Stewardship, you are going to colonize it after what I just told you? The planet is alive. It breathes, it has a rhythm. Introducing a human presence, our chaotic biological noise, it could destabilize everything all over again. Or it could lead to a beautiful new synergy, Lin countered smoothly. Imagine Dr. Human ingenuity paired with Mechanus's perfect order. We can learn its secrets. We can harness its output. And the Exiles, Aris asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. What happens to them? Gorvan leaned forward, his expression almost pitying. The preservation of the core biosphere is our primary concern. These Exiles are a relic of a failed synchronization. They are not the future of Mechanus. They will be studied, of course, but the tectonic rift is also the richest source of viridium ore on the planet. The mining operations will have to be carefully managed to minimize disruption. Minimize disruption. The euphemism was a punch to the gut. They would carve up the Exiles' sanctuary for scrap metal. They would study the stag tick until they understood how it worked, and then they would discard the broken pieces. You are making a terrible mistake, Aris said, standing up, his chair scraping against the floor. You are seeing equations and profit margins. You did not stand there. You did not feel its heart beating. This is not stewardship, it is a seizure. Your emotional attachment is understandable, Dr. Thorne, Vess said, her voice cool. You went through a traumatic event. You are hereby granted 3 months of standard leave for psychological debriefing and recovery. It was a dismissal, a gentle bureaucratic way of putting him out to pasture, of silencing him. You cannot just bury this, Aris said, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. We are not burying it, Lin smiled, a thin, bloodless expression. We are building on it. Your legacy will be the founding of Outpost Precision, the man who saved a world and opened it for humanity. That is a much better story than one about a few malfunctioning animals, do not you think? Aris left the debriefing room in a daze. The corridors of Carthage Station seemed to press in on him, their artificial order a pale, pathetic imitation of the deep, resonant truth of Mechanus. They had taken his nightmare and his miracle and turned it into a real estate prospect. He reached his assigned quarters, a small impersonal cubicle with a view of the stars. Mechanus was out there, a tiny pinprick in the precision system. Its new song was playing, and now a new greedy instrument was about to be added to the orchestra. He had saved the Clockwork jungle from one kind of death, only to hand it over to another, a slower, more bureaucratic death by 1,000 cuts. He opened a private log, his voice low and strained. Log entry: Dr. Aris Thorne, personal, supplemental. They did not understand, they could not. To the Council, a world is a set of data points. Life is a resource. A soul is a non-operational term. They are going to build an outpost. They are going to mine the rift. They will call it progress. They will put my name on a plaque and think that justifies it. I thought the most terrifying sound in the universe was the silence after the scream. I was wrong. The most terrifying sound is the quiet hum of a committee deciding a world's fate over coffee. It is the click of a stamp on a form that condemns a species to be studied. The machine is saved, but the architects are moving in, and I have become the ghost in the machine they are about to overhaul. He looked out at the cold, distant stars. My leave is approved, but I am not going to a beach. I am going back. I do not know how yet or what I can do, but I gave that world a new heartbeat. I cannot just stand by and listen while they try to put a leash on it. Chapter 6: The Ghost in the Machine. 3 months of standard leave was a gilded cage. Aris Thorne wandered the manicured parks of the luxury resort on Cygnus Prime, the air sweet, with the scent of genetically engineered blossoms, and felt nothing but a hollow, ringing dissonance. The perfect curated beauty around him was a mockery of the wild, painful, and authentic struggle he had left behind on Mechanus. He was a ghost here, haunting a world that had no need for his particular brand of hauntedness. His terminal buzzed with daily updates from Carthage Station, sanitized reports on the rapid and successful establishment of Outpost Precision. He saw images of sleek geometric structures rising from the Cradle Plateau, their clean lines a stark contrast to the now perfectly humming but still organic Clockwork jungle. He read reports of initial mineralogical surveys in the tectonic rift. The word disruption was never used. The word exiles was never mentioned. He was being managed, his access carefully filtered. But Aris Thorne was a scientist and a desperate one. He knew how to find signals in the noise. Using a nested encryption protocol he had developed during his postdoc years, a thing of beauty meant for hiding sensitive ecological data from corporate rivals, he sliced through the T's firewalls. He was not accessing official channels, he was tapping into the raw, unedited data streams from the survey drones and environmental sensors on Mechanus. The reality was uglier than the reports. He watched video feeds of massive quadruped mining, walkers their feet like pile drivers stomping through the upper reaches of the tectonic rift. Sonic probes designed to shatter rock sent debilitating waves of vibration through the Exiles' sanctuary. He saw a herd of stag, tick the ones he had seen trying to care for one another, scattering in a limping, terrified panic as a drill platform bored into the cliff face above their cavern. He saw the studies. A bird construct its wings clipped trapped in a resonance cage, while scientists in sterile suits recorded its frantic out-of-sync fluttering. A scuttling beetle dissected on a table, its internal mechanics laid bare like a broken watch. And he saw the leader, the large stag tick, with the intelligent eyes. It stood its ground before the advancing machinery, more than once a solitary broken figure facing down the inexorable tide of progress. Its defiance was a silent scream in the data stream. That was the image that broke him, not the planetary agony of the harmonic engine, but this single quiet act of courage in the face of oblivion. He had saved the body of Mechanus, but its soul was being systematically dismantled in a dark rift, and he was the one who had shown the vultures where to find it. His leave was over in 2 days. He was scheduled for a debriefing, followed by a promotion to a desk job analyzing xenological data from the safety of Carthage, a comfortable coffin. That night, under the false stars of Cygnus Prime, he made his choice. He was not going back to Carthage. He used the last of his personal funds, a not inconsiderable sum from a lifetime of careful saving, to make contact with the Kobayashi Maru. It was not on any official registry. It was a ghost ship, a blockade runner crewed by individuals who believed the Terran Expansion Authority's stewardship was a polite word for pillaging. Its captain, a grizzled woman named Aurora, with eyes as cold as space, listened to his story without comment. "You want to run to a quarantined world, not from it?" she asked, her voice a dry rasp. "That is new and stupid. It will cost you." "I have nothing left to pay with but the truth," Aris said, "and the coordinates of the T's primary sensor blind spot on the northern ice cap. They are still relying on my initial planetary survey. I omitted a few things." Aurora's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "Weaponized bureaucracy. I like it. Welcome aboard, Doctor." The journey back was a tense, silent affair. The Kobayashi Maru was a stark contrast to the Horizon's whisper. It smelled of recycled sweat, ozone, and rebellion. Aris spent the time in his tiny bunk running simulations on his personal datapad. He was not planning to resynchronize a planet this time. His goal was smaller, more personal: sabotage. They slipped past the T-patrols with nerve-wracking ease, using the blind spot he had provided. The descent into Mechanus's atmosphere was a violent engine-burning plunge designed to look like a meteorite impact on T-scopes. They set down on the frozen, resonantly dead expanse of the northern polar cap, where the new song was faint and the T's interest was zero. Aris suited up. His plan was simple, insane, and the only thing he had left. He would travel to the tectonic rift on foot, using the old unstable paths he had memorized. He would find the Exiles, and he would give them a weapon. The weapon was his own design, based on his deep understanding of Mechanus's new resonance. A dissonance charge, a small device that, when activated, would emit a powerful, chaotic burst of acoustic energy perfectly designed to jam the T's equipment. It would not harm the Exiles, their rhythm was already chaotic, but it would render the mining walkers inert, blind the survey drones, and give the Exiles a fighting chance to retreat deeper into the rift to places even the T would not bother to follow. It was a delaying action, a gesture, but it was all he had. The trek across the unstable polar gear plates and into the labyrinthine canyons leading to the rift was a week-long ordeal. He was alone with the planet's new steady hum, a sound that now felt like an accusation. He saw no life. This was a sterile, synchronized wasteland. When he finally reached the lip of the tectonic rift, the sight below stole his breath. The T's presence was a cancer. Gantries and lights scarred the ancient walls. The air was thick with the roar of machinery and the smell of spent fuel. The delicate, haunting hum of the Exiles' sanctuary was drowned out. He began his descent, using his mag clamps to navigate the sheer cliffs, sticking to the shadows. He was nearly to the ledge leading to the cavern when a spotlight lanced out, pinning him. "Halt, identify yourself," a voice barked from a T security drone hovering above. Aris froze, his heart hammering. It was over before it began. But then a sound cut through the industrial din, a deep, resonant, and perfectly timed clang, then another and another. It was the laid stag tick. It stood on an outcropping, deliberately slamming its damaged piston leg against a resonant plate of metal it had seemingly placed there for this purpose. It was creating a rhythm, a complex pulsing beat. Thrum clang, thrum clang. It was a variation on the new planetary rhythm, but distorted, amplified. A sonic weapon. The effect on the T equipment was immediate. The security drone wobbled, its lights flickering. The spotlights around the mining operations stuttered and died. The deep thrum of the walkers' engines choked and sputtered into silence. The stag tick was not just fighting, it was conducting, using the planet's own song against the invaders. In the resulting confusion and darkness, Aris did not hesitate. He scrambled down the final stretch and into the Exiles' cavern. It was a scene of desperate defiance. The Exiles were not just hiding anymore. They had built. Crude barriers made of shattered machinery blocked the main entrance. The bird constructs from perches high above dropped sharpened shards of crystal onto the stalled walkers below. The beetles swarmed over power conduits, their mismatched mandibles snipping and severing. The stag tick leader turned as Aris entered. Its intelligent eyes met his, and in that gaze he saw no gratitude, no plea for help. He saw recognition, the recognition of a fellow soldier. Aris held up the dissonance charge. "I brought you a louder voice." He moved to the crude resonance spire, the one he had repaired, but the stag tick nudged him away with its head. It then pointed its antlers not at the spire, but at a new, even cruder structure nearby. It was a tangled nest of wires leading to a central hollowed-out crystal. It looked almost like a neural interface. The stag tick looked from the interface to Aris and then back. The meaning was staggering, terrifying. It was not asking for a tool. It was asking for a fusion. It wanted to bridge the gap, to combine its innate intuitive understanding of the planet's rhythm with Aris's scientific analytical mind. To create a new kind of consciousness, a hybrid conductor for their rebellion. To do it would be to cross a line from which there was no return. He would no longer be an observer, a scientist, or even a savior. He would become part of the machine in a way no human ever had. He looked at the desperate fighting Exiles. He looked at the stalled but not defeated T machinery already beginning to reboot outside. He heard the planet's steady, impersonal hum, a rhythm that had no room for them. He had no right to refuse. "All right, Aris Thorne," whispered his voice, lost in the chaotic symphony of the rift. "Let's make some noise." He placed his hands on the cool, resonant crystal. The stag tick pressed its damaged antler assembly into the nest of wires. A jolt like a synaptic lightning strike tore through him. It was not pain, it was data, a flood of sensation, rhythm, and memory that was not his own. He felt the old song, the comfort of the ancient pulse. He felt the searing agony of the great dissonance. He felt the profound alienation of the new synchronization. And he felt the fierce, burning will to survive not as a perfect cog, but as a flawed, defiant individual. In return, he gave it focus. He gave it physics. He gave it the schematics of the T's mining walkers, their power caused their vibrational weaknesses. He gave it the concept of the dissonance charge and 1,000 variations on the theme. Their two consciousnesses did not merge so much as they duetted. A song of rebellion began to compose itself in the space between them, a terrible and beautiful piece of music written in the key of survival. The T security forces, having reset their systems, began to advance again into the cavern, their weapons raised. But Aris and the stag tick were ready. As one they opened their eyes, his biological, its luminous lenses, and looked upon their enemies. And from the crude interface, a new sound erupted. It was not the pure tone of the pulsar or the chaotic scream of dissonance. It was a targeted, intelligent, and utterly hostile waveform that sought out and unraveled the precise resonant frequencies of Terran technology. Lights exploded, weapon systems fried, walkers seized their joints, locking permanently. Aris Thorne, the man who had saved a world, had now become the ghost in its machine, and he was just beginning to learn how to haunt.